Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I'm Tyler here with my brother Brian, and today Brian and I we are breaking down our top 100 prospects in this year's draft class. And so a lot of names you guys are going to be familiar with, but I think we just want to kind of put our take in it and the players that we feel are going to be the most valuable as well. So we're going to start off at 100, work our way up all the way to number one. We're going to have a full long episode if you want to just listen to us in the car. If you don't want to listen to us for that long, I totally get it. So we're going to break up then even these clips as well into other videos at 20 player increments. So be sure to follow this series. And then next week as well, a little housekeeping announcement. We are going to be doing our second 3-round mock draft. It's going to be the first full week now after all the tampering and then all the NFL free agency starting of the new season coming up this week. So it's going to be a fascinating one. A lot of changes, a lot of draft picks going around, a lot of probably different positional ideas I think that Ryan and I will have. So be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified when all those videos come out. Ryan, let's pull this up here. So starting at number 100. This was actually probably one of the tougher ones because a lot of the other names as well, you know, like once you get to 70 or 60 or 50, you're like, okay, these guys are top 100 picks. It's just where do these want to go? Picking number 100, well, shoot, we had 400 other players. That's like, who do we want to include in this list? So we went with Bo Limmer here, going with center from Arkansas. I think one of the things I think that's unique about him specifically, but also more just the positional as well. Interior offensive lineman, I feel like it's not that deep of an interior offensive lineman, especially after the top. I would say the top 100, really. So when you get to here as well, if you're looking for a center or looking for an interior offensive lineman, I think he had a great career at Arkansas. He tested pretty well at the combine. I think he's going to be a consistent guy for teams trying to bolster their interior offensive line. Potentially, too, I mean, just for example, the Eagles as well, you know, like obviously moving on from Jason Kelce. Not moving on, Jason Kelce moved on from them. And just as a thought. And so that's why I kind of want to include this here because I think all 32 teams could agree that interior offensive lineman is probably one of the most important positions in the entire league.
Yeah, and he's a good size. He's 6'5", 310. Maybe if you want to kick him out to guard, put an extra 5-10 pounds on him, and I think he would hold up pretty well. But I definitely play center. He is a little bit more on the athletic side, and like he had a good game this year against Alabama as well. And so you like to see that as that competition gets tougher. That he's able to hold up as well. So let's move on to number 99 on our top 100, and that's Michael Hall Jr., the defensive tackle out of Ohio State. I will say we use the term defensive tackle loosely here. He's a little bit of a tweener at 6'2", 280. He's going to be a defensive end in 4-3 schemes. He's going to be a 3-4 end in those, so kind of going to play over tackles, over guards. But he's more of a pass rushing defensive tackle, but definitely can hold up against the run. Not something that you want to like be putting him in a ton of run situations, but just a really nice option here to go and get some interior pressure here at the end of day 3. If you're one of those teams, it's kind of where I have him going into day 3 early, or end of day 2, early day 3 there as well.
Yeah. So, Javon Baker, receiver from UCF, Chris Abrams-Drain, cornerback from Mizzou, Gabriel Murphy, edge from UCLA. I think all these guys are going to be very unique, kind of in that similar spot as what you're talking about. Gabriel Murphy was across from Laiatu Latu, had a good career at UCLA. Chris Abrams-Drain as well. He's across from Enos Rakestraw this year going up against top SEC competition. Javon Baker, he's a guy that you have been talking about as well. What are some of the things that you like about Javon Baker?
Height, weight, speed, I think is his calling card. He's not going to be the most technically refined route runner. He has good hands. He's good in jump ball situations, but at 6'2", 210, I think he ran in the low 4.5s, which is pretty good for that size. And I think he would be an earlier day 2 pick if this wide receiver class was not just absolutely loaded. I mean, you think of the guys that are going to be going like early in round 3, you have the Brendan Rices, the Tez Walkers, the Malachi Corleys, and Javon Baker is up there in conversation with some of those guys just in terms of his actual physical ability. But I just think he maybe isn't quite as refined as some of those guys. And this wide receiver class as a whole is just absolutely loaded. You're going to have guys going in the 4th round that are going to be probably starting for some of the teams that they get drafted by. So an interesting one there. Another guy that I like, Chris Abrams-Drain. He's a little bit undersized, so he's probably going to play in your slot, but he's a really twitchy athlete, can be sticky in man coverage, and has a good feel for zone as well. Gabriel Murphy, another kind of height, weight, speed guy, but I think everybody goes and watches UCLA and they see Laiatu Latu. Gabriel Murphy probably gets a little bit overlooked just in that sense where, yeah, he played with a really solid edge rusher that's going to go at the top of this class, but he himself actually possesses some pretty good pass rush moves, and I think he'll be effective at the next level. So let's move on here to our next 5. We're going to kick it off with Max Melton from Rutgers. I like his size. Going to be 5'11", 195. I don't have his exact combine measurements up, but I believe that is around where he was. So
I think he was 187. I can pull it up.
Here. 187. Okay.
Yeah. So he was. If the internet would pick up a little bit here. So yeah, he was 5'11", 187, 32.18 inch arms.
So, but that's really good length for a corner of this spot. As deep as this wide receiver class is, this cornerback class also has similar depth, maybe not quite the level of talent as far back, but I think we're going to look at some of these late day 2, early day 3 corners, and there's going to be some really good players in there. So Maurice Liufau as well is a little bit more of a thumper of a linebacker from Notre Dame, but just a really good athlete there as well. And he's going to make some teams really happy at the next level.
Yeah. Long arms too. I thought at least 34 and quarter inch arms. And so I'm tested okay at the combine. I would say 4.6, 4.40 is pretty good for, I think, a guy who likes to run downhill. I think the guy that is super interesting to me on where he's going to go is Johnny Wilson. We went back and forth a lot on where we wanted to put him. And I can see him going late day 2. I could see him going early day 2. Early 3rd round. I think his range is gonna be that early 60s to right around here in the 90s, just because he's such a unique kind of guy. He's 6'6", 6'6", 231.
Yeah,
just huge for a receiver. I mean, he's bigger than some tight ends. And so, what teams are going to want to utilize him? Like I could see a team maybe like Detroit. They did just trade one of their 3rd round draft picks away. So maybe if they were wanting to wait on a receiver and get him here, if he ends up falling to them with their 90th pick, or I think their pick is somewhere around 90. I can't remember exactly, but he would just be opposite of something that they have now. Just because you have Jameson Williams and Monroe St. Brown, these speedsters. So
I wouldn't define Johnny Wilson as an explosive athlete, but he has that fluidness to his game that you like, especially for a guy of that size. He's definitely more. He's a lot quicker than like somebody at this size. The NFL is most likely going to be kicked into like a tight end role or like a receiving tight end, and he's quicker than the tight ends that you would put in that, like, kind of pigeonhole in that role. And he's fast enough on the outside to actually stack DBs and like go up in contested catch situation. So I really like him here. Another team, my team, I think they just cut Devontae Parker today at the start of free agency. And if you look, Johnny Wilson and Devontae Parker, especially Devontae Parker later in his career, probably have pretty similar skill sets, just in the fact that they're going to be outside receivers, they're going to be man beaters and jump ball contested catch guys. And so that's another team there. But moving on to Jerrion Jones, the fellow Seminole, he's another really solid corner here, similar to Max Melton, similar size. I believe he does hit that 6 foot mark at 191. So he's going to be able to play a little bit on the outside. He has good length, good athlete. Gets, I would say, a little lost in some zone coverages and is a plus athlete, but nothing elite. I do just like his overall package a lot and what he would bring to teams. And I think he'd be a really good value here in the 3rd round, especially if he goes to a team that can coach him up a little bit.
Yeah. And so lastly, wrapping up the top 90 here, Jaden Hicks, safety from Washington, 6'2", 211. I think it's going to be unique on where he goes. He was another guy. Some boards have him up higher, some like ours maybe a little bit lower. I think once again too, it's I forget which player. It just I think it's Gabriel Murphy. I think just such an offensive heavy class. I think some of the, especially safeties, I think
Yeah.
are going to fall down a little bit more. And I think too, safeties are going to be the running backs of the defense, just
Yeah.
because a lot of corners or outside corners who don't make it as outside corners, it's easier for them to shift up to safety than it is for safeties and to switch up to corners as well. So I
Yeah.
think it's a more competitive position on the probably the most competitive position on the defensive side of the ball, just
Yeah.
because
It,
there's a lot of guys I think that can move into that spot.
Yeah, and I think you look too. We're in the heart of free agency right now. There were a ton of guys that were released: Jamal Adams, Justin Simmons, like
Everybody from Buffalo.
yeah, all of the secondary from Buffalo. Like there's a lot of guys that are currently looking for spots at the safety position. I will say none of them. Maybe Jamal Adams has the size, but Jaden Hicks, he's going to be that strong safety. He's probably going to play close to the line of scrimmage, coming downhill, and
Yeah.
he likes to hit. So. A really solid player there. Let's move on now to the next five here. Kicking off with another safety, Kalen Bullock from
USC.
USC. Yeah.
Yeah. A typo. Yeah.
No, you're good.
Yes.
And then another versatile guy. This guy is going to probably play a little bit further off the line of scrimmage, maybe in a two high. I think he has the speed to play in a single high, but maybe not the instincts just yet to be a single high safety. But another really solid player here. I think this safety class, this sweet spot's going to kind of be in that third and fourth round. Where you're going to get a lot of really talented guys that can come in and contribute. I like your analogy. They're kind of the running backs of the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys like, for example, even Kool-Aid McKinstry, who we're going to get to here in probably about 40 minutes. He's a guy outside corner at Alabama, but I've even heard some talks just with the way he can read, see the offense and be the voice within the defense, but just with his overall athleticism isn't as up to par, just based off reports, that he would be a great safety. And so a guy like Kalen Bullock, or if you're already a safety coming in, it just brings in more competition. So I think here at 89, 88, 87, and 86, it's kind of something similar to what we said with Bo Limmer a little bit earlier, but we've got all interior offensive linemen here. It's just kind of tough to see where they're going to want to fall in, but I think Cooper Beebe, Zach Zinter, Christian Mahogany, Cedric Van Pran all have, I think, unique positives that separate themselves from one another, but then also unique differentiators as well, deficiencies. Like Cooper Beebe, I think, had a great career at Kansas State. Seemed like he tested pretty well at the combine. Does have shorter arms. I know that's a big thing, just measuring wise. So is that going to be something that drops him off?
Not so much at the guard position. I will say, like overall length, I guess, is something that you want to have. But at the guard position, it's not as big of a deal. Whereas the tackle position, when you have those edge rushers and you want to get to their chest before they get to yours, that's always a big thing there. But Zach Zinter probably would be much higher on our list if he didn't get injured at the end of the year. And also Cedric Van Pran, we have him at the top because I think he has the most positional flexibility here. He can play center and guard at an NFL level, whereas the rest of the guys are guards that could potentially play center.
Zinter could play center. He did some time. I can't speak to Mahogany, but
I was more referencing BB and Mahogany just because, and I'm sure they can. It's not that much different technically once when you get into the blocking, like the actual blocking, you're just having to snap the ball. So, but again, Zinter is there. He would be much higher on our board if he didn't get injured. So, but Van Pran was the head of that offensive line at Georgia. Mentally, I think he sees the game very well, and I think some teams are going to be really happy that he falls down here. Also, another thing, I think based off of last year's draft, we both had John Michael Schmitz and Osiris Torrance with like first round grades, and both of those guys fell to like the mid to late second round. I think the NFL as a whole is starting to just, I don't want to say devalue the interior offensive linemen, but they're becoming a little bit more replaceable as the schemes simplify and are spread out. So it's just an interesting kind of dynamic of how high do interior offensive linemen actually go. So let's move on to the last five in our first 20. Here at 85, Jamari Thrash, the wide receiver from Louisville. really a twitchy guy. I believe he has good size. He's 6 foot, probably 185, 190. But he had a really good Senior Bowl. He had a really good year at Louisville, and good hands, good route runner. Maybe not the most explosive athlete. And maybe I think that's why he probably is down on a few people's boards. But I think he still has room to grow. Good hands, just an all around good wide receiver. But in this class where there's all of these really, really good wide receivers, he falls down here to 85.
Yeah. 6 foot 188, ran a 4.46
Yeah.
40, 1.54 10-yard split.
Oh, okay. Actually, that's very explosive.
Yeah. But to your point though, with how deep that this class is, it's like I think that those are good numbers. But then when you still have, I know it's the top end of it, but when you have Xavier Worthy running a 4.21, you know, and then there's a lot of other guys in between, even Lad McConkey and Ricky Pearsall, I would say about that same size, and we're about a tenth quicker.
And then you have Xavier Legette, Tez Walker, and A.D. Mitchell that are all 6 foot plus, running 200, running in the 4.3s. Like, that's the kind of class that we're comparing Jamari Thrash to. And so again, here at 85, he's probably wide receiver 12 or 13 on the board. But if you look at last year's class, he's a middle second round pick.
It sucks too, because if he was a junior, like, this would be a perfect class, I think, for him to be like, hey, I'm going to be like the 15th receiver. I actually like here. Let me see if you have our Excel sheet up while I'm going through this. Like, what number receiver is he? But there are just so many guys. Like, he was forced to come into this class. I think it would be very interesting if he would have come in next year, depending on what the class is. But that's where I think he is just, unfortunately, for just how deep this class is. But that being said, though, too, I think this also goes to show that if teams want to wait on getting a receiver, there are going to be guys available. We're even about to get to another one here in a second in Jalen McMillan.
He is receiver 20 on this list, which is kind of crazy to think about, that he's our second or third wide receiver on our top 100, and he's the 20th. He's the third wide receiver that we've gone through so far, because we're going down from 100. So in our top 100, a fifth of the picks are wide receivers.
That's insane.
Yeah, actually, that's just how talented this wide receiver class is. So let's move on to Jeremiah Trotter, the athletic linebacker from Clemson. This is also kind of the height, weight, speed guy, and also I think a position that is being slightly devalued is the linebacker position. There's really three guys at the top of this class. You have Jeremiah Trotter, Edgerrin Cooper, and then Peyton Wilson from NC State. And Jeremiah Trotter, I think, athletically kind of competes with all those guys. He played in the complex defense at Clemson. And on tape, he just has a really good feel for pass coverage. He comes downhill really well. So, again, just a really solid player here. I will say, again, the linebacker position is, I guess, slightly getting devalued as teams go on. I think edge rushers and pass disruptive defensive tackles maybe take the edge over linebackers in the modern day NFL, unless you're Fred Warner. And
well, I also think too, if you go look at so many offenses now run a 11 personnel now, so you got at least three wide receivers. A lot of time too, you got a tight end that can go out and catch, and then you got a running back there. So you can't go and have like a 4-3 type defense now, and then just have four secondary guys. So a lot of times, like, they're going to be running nickel or a 3-down lineman with that new outside linebacker, and you're going to be running with like 5 or 6 secondary guys, like whether it be 1 or 2 safeties and then rest corners. So a guy like Trotter, who is a perfectly fine linebacker, one of the best linebackers in this class, is just a little bit bigger, just maybe a little bit, slower. And all right, so that's why he's fallen a little bit down on this board. From when I think we first started doing mock drafts, I think he was a borderline potentially first-round pick, or a minimum second round, and for sure second round. I can still see him going in the second round. It's just going to be depending on how teams really like him compared to the Peyton Wilson or Edgerrin Cooper or some of the other linebackers. So let's wrap up here this top 20 with Ray Davis, Jalen McMillan, and Andrew Phillips. Ray Davis, running back out of Kentucky. I remember, I think, when you took me with your in-laws to the Georgia Tech game, and we were watching Kentucky. Who was Kentucky playing that day?
Florida. If you need to know why I love Ray Davis so much, just go watch his highlights versus Florida. That's That's all I have to say.
He was the
Florida
highlights.
Up.
He was
the
highlights.
Insane.
So I think the thing I like about him too is he is maybe 1 or 2 inches smaller than I think the ideal bell cow type back. 5'8", 211. I think he can be your 3-down back. He's
Yeah.
perfectly fine catch the ball out of the backfield. Maybe if you get a little bit better blocking, the pass blocking protection. But as a Falcons fan, I will say the exact same thing about Bijan. So I think that just comes with time. And I think that's something that they can absolutely that any team that gets he'll just slowly develop that over time. But if you're a team that's looking for a 3-down back, I mean, shoot, I'm looking at like Minnesota right here, and so I don't think they have a 3rd-round pick. But if they're able to trade back or however get some more picks, I think he'd be a perfect guy if Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, all those guys are off the board. Or maybe you like Ray Davis more than that. Maybe you want Ray Davis more than those guys. So I think he's going to provide a lot of good value for a team. He's going to be a consistent guy that would be a great running back by committee, but he has the capability to be a bell cow.
His build kind of reminds me of like Mike Tolbert is like way too big, but like the way he bounces off tackles and like his contact balance is just it does remind me a little bit of Mike Tolbert, but then he's also a little bit smaller, much more naturally athletic, and just
I would say I can't remember exactly what Maurice Jones-Drew weight was.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good comp.
I think Jones-Drew was 5'6", 5'7", but he's just so small. He's small enough you can't see him behind these linemen. So imagine like the Titans or like whoever gets Joe Alt, then you go get Ray Davis. You're not looking at you can't see Ray Davis. If Joe Alt's blocking you, you cannot see Ray Davis until he hits you. And so, I think it's going to be fascinating on whichever team that he goes to. I think another guy as well will be fascinating is the next guy, Jalen McMillan, because I think he's kind of almost in the Johnny Wilson camp a little bit, not because of his size, but it's just going to be what team is going to want to use him. I'm trying to think of teams that would want to use him, but I think this is a fair spot for him, considering all the other receivers that are going to be taken before him.
Yeah, and I think you look at how productive he was in that Washington offense. Granted, there was a lot of production to go around, but even with Jalen Polk and Rome Odunze, who we will talk about both of those guys later on in this series, Jalen McMillan, they were still scheming up plays for him. He was still winning in one-on-one matchups, and frankly, he was moved around just as much, if not maybe even more than the other guys. Because being that wide receiver 3, he was the one kind of being put in various situations in different matchups. I really like Jalen McMillan as a prospect. He has good hands. He can win on the route. He can win in jump ball situations. He has good size at 6'1", 192. Like just a really solid prospect here. And then at 81, Andrew Phillips, cornerback out of Kentucky. I will say technique-wise, maybe not the best corner, but athletically, I really like what he brings to the table. He's an elite athlete and just a really, really solid prospect, I think, for teams that are looking that maybe have some cornerback depth, but are maybe looking for a guy that they can come in and develop and mold into their own. I think Andrew Phillips would be a fantastic pick here in round 3 because of these corners. I think he's definitely one of the more athletic ones.
Yeah. Yep. So I agree with that. So that's the first 20 picks here. If you're still with us, greatly appreciate it. Be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell as we